I want to welcome everybody to Peary Library. We've missed you guys. We haven't been able to do the meet in the library, so we're still trying to bring you some quality programming, and we're going to do it through Zoom. So we'll learn all this together. Tonight we're doing the meeting having continuous color throughout the year with perennials. So I think we've all had a little bit more time at home. Maybe we've all been working in the garden. So we've got Shelley Baeslack tonight, and she's a master gardener. She's going to show us how to do that. And I just want to also remind you, I've got you online here to not forget to enter our adult summer reading program. This year we are supporting our small businesses. So instead of reading books, we're just saying, give us an entry with a receipt from a small business in Lake County, and that enters you into the drawing. So we've got $25 gift cards for 6 of our local businesses. So make sure you come in and enter that. And then next Tuesday, we've got Patrick Armstrong from Westminster Financial. And he's going to tell us some short-term and some long-term adjustments we can make to our portfolios as we recover from all the results from the COVID virus. So I'd like to introduce you tonight to Shelley, and she's going to take over and do the presentation on the continuous color with perennials. Hi, Shelley.
Hi, Peggy. Thank you very much for introducing me. What happened here?
I am going to go into you, and I am going to...
I hit share screen.
Okay, yes.
Let's see. There we are.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to put this, hopefully... Okay, can you see my screen?
I can see it.
Okay, thank you. As Peggy said, my name's Shelley Baeslack. I'm an OSU Lake County Master Gardener volunteer. This is my 10th year anniversary. I was the class of 2010. And I thank you for coming and listening, and thank you for having me, Peggy.
You're welcome.
I want to tell you a little bit about the OSU Extension. We do more than just master gardening. We have family and consumer sciences out of the office. There's 4-H, which is a big program, and there's no fair this year, but they're still trudging through. We do community development, and the big one, of course, in Lake County is agricultural and natural resources. We are the OSU Extension Office. We're currently at 99 East Erie Street in Paynesville, but that will be changing once everything's said and done with the COVID and we can move into our new building. Our phone number, which you can call for helpline, which is on Tuesdays from 9 to 11. You can call in, ask any question you have about gardening, and we will research it if we don't know the answer. And that number is the 440-350-2582. And you can also, on Tuesdays, our extension educator is in the office from 9 to 10:45, and you can bring in samples to him if you have a question on something, like if you have an insect or you have a plant you don't know what's wrong with. He's in the office again on Tuesday from 9 to 10:45 to look at those samples, or you can drop them off and he'll look at them and give you a call. And you can go to lake.osu.edu, and that is our website, and you can also find us on Facebook. Now we're talking about perennials, and these are pictures of one garden in 4 different seasons. You see spring, summer, fall, and winter here. And as you can see, there's color or interest in all of the seasons. The first thing you have to do is to make a plan. Draw a rough sketch of your garden area, marking your shrubs, your trees, your existing plants, walls, anything that you have sitting in your garden. Then you need to evaluate your site. How large is the area? Do you need a soil test maybe? Do you have any existing structures? How about a water source? Think about what type maintenance you're going to want to give your garden and what type light you have, what type moisture you have, and are you a protected or windy area? Now for the area of your garden, do you have a small little space here like this incubator garden? Or do you have some vast lands like this tunnel made from rose bushes at Warwick Castle in England? I'm going to put down that, okay. Now a soil test. Go to thelake.osu.edu and follow the link to the soil test. Click on Master Gardener Volunteer Program on the left. Click on Soil Testing and the Penn State on the left. Then, or when we get out of this COVID, you can come into the office and purchase a kit for $10. Either way you do it, follow the instructions and then send it in and wait for an answer. When you get the answer, call the office if you need help reading it. While you're waiting for your soil test to come back, whoop, why isn't this? Okay, that worked. Think about existing structures in your yard. Do you have a tree? Or maybe the wall of your house? Maybe your neighbors put up a fence. Or maybe your wonderful son built you this wall. Do you have a water source close by? You should. Water needs to be easily accessible because if it isn't, you're not going to be wanting to tote water and then your plants will dry out and they won't do as well. Maintenance. How much work do you want to put into that plant? Do you want a prima donna plant like this rose tree? Or do you want something happy-go-lucky like these daylilies or something in between? How about light? How much light do you have in your yard? There's full sun at 8+ hours a day of direct sunlight. There's part sun and part shade, which is 4 to 6 hours of direct sun. There's shade, which is 1 to 3 hours of direct sun. And there's deep shade, which has no direct sunlight, only reflected sunlight. In my yard, I have some of all of this. What about moisture? Do you ever get standing water? Or do you have moist but well-drained soil? Or do you have soil that dries out very easily? Wind movement. Do you have a lot of wind movement as pictured by this rough lake? Or do you have very little because it's in a guarded area, a protected area? And what type of a garden do you want to put in? A butterfly garden, a cutting garden, a flower garden, a kid's garden, a garden to benefit your pollinators? What about a privacy garden? Or maybe a veggie garden? Now for perennials. We're talking about perennials, but do you really know what they are? A perennial will last 3 or more years if it is hardy in your zone. A biennial will last 2 years, but will reseed itself and let you think that it is a perennial. A good example of this would be a hollyhock. Your garden can include flowers, bulbs, woodies, shrubs, trees, and biennials to give you continuous color throughout the season. Perennials in other zones are annuals here, for example, the poinsettia. And perennials here are annuals in other zones, for example, carpet phlox. Now, by this time, you should have received your soil test results. Bring it in or call the OSU Lake County Extension Office. And if you need someone to read it and explain it to you, our extension educator, Tom, can do that for you. You'll most likely have to amend your soil in some way. You can tweak your soil's pH to change the color on some plants, like the hydrangeas. All of these came from the same bush. Now the fun begins. You get to pick out your plants and go to the garden store. or nowadays do it online. First thing you have to know is your zone. There are a lot of different zones, hardiness zones in the US. It's said that Ohio has changed. Parts of northern Ohio by the lake are now 6B. Most of Ohio is still 6A, and some scattered spots are 5B, such as Mansfield, because they're at that higher elevation. To be safe, though, stay at zone 5. Enough time hasn't gone past to be safe, and we get those odd winters that we get hit with that deep Arctic blast. Pets. Do you have pets in your household? Make sure that the plants you pick out are safe for them. Some plants are toxic to our pets. And if you go to the ASPCA website, they can give you a list of plants that are harmful to your pets. They sort it out between dogs and cats and other pets, and it's a very good resource to have. What about deer? Do they frequent your yard? I know a lot of places in northern Ohio just can't grow much of anything because of the deer. If you have deer, make sure to buy plants that are deer resistant. No plant is deer proof. If deer are hungry, they will eat most any plant. Now, my favorite thing to keep the deer away is dried coyote urine. You can get that in the garden centers, or you can get it on Amazon or anywhere else you buy things online that carries that type of a product. But it's a lot easier to use and won't get all over your hands like the sprayable coyote urine does. Now check your label or your tag. I think tags they're full of information for you. This one tells you the key benefits of your plant, the time it flowers, how large it gets, and its hardiness zone. This plant is good in California because it's zone 9 through 11. What type sun to give it, how to take care of it, and how to plant it. And that's a really good thing to have on your tag. This one will give you a description. It tells you it's full shade to part shade. It's great in pots, and it says it needs moderate water. And it tells you down here how to care for it. This one tells you what type of a plant it is. It's a perennial, and it gets to about 1 foot high and 1 to 3 feet in width. And you need to know that because you need to know how far to space your plants so that they're not too crowded. It tells you the bloom season and where to place it. Again, watering needs. And this one has some different information, pruning needs. Now, what to look for? Look for plants that have interest in as many seasons as possible. What about blooms? Do they get one bloom and they're done? Or do they get lots of bloom? How about their foliage? Is it interesting? I have some plants that have variegated foliage, that have blue-green foliage, which is really interesting. What about fruit? After the plant blooms, it gives you seeds. But what type seeds? That is the fruit. Or the bark of your plant. How is that? Is it rough? Is it shiny? Is it look like camouflage? Now the following slides are broken up by the time the plant begins to bloom. Some bloom 3 to 4 weeks and will overlap into the next season. And many, if you deadhead them, will be prolonged in their bloom time. Early spring. The Helleborus or Lenten rose is one of the earliest plants to bloom in the spring. Brunera, I love this flower. I'm going to be saying that a lot, I think. It has dainty blue flowers and long-lasting foliage that will stay the rest of the year. You can see that this foliage here is variegated, and the flowers, they're gorgeous. They're just airy and dainty and almost fairy-like. The Grape Hyacinth, that's a wonderful plant. It comes up in the fall and the leaves stay green all winter. You could have a problem with bunnies eating the leaves like they did at my house this year. but I love the little Grape Hyacinth. Grecian Windflower. Grecian Windflower is another good flower. It's one of the first riotous spots of color that you're going to get in your yard. A snowdrop. They're so named because lots of times you'll see their little flower popping up through the snow. And here's an early spring combination. In mid-spring, the Bleeding Heart is a good one. It comes out fairly early in mid-spring, and they now have continuous blooming varieties. I have one in my yard right now that's still blooming, and however, the older varieties will disappear in midsummer, making you think that your plant has died. Creeping Phlox, this comes in a variety of colors, and it will spread and cascade over a wall for you, and it is also an evergreen. Daffodils. These, as you know, are bulb plants, and they are deer resistant. Deer don't seem to like daffodils very much. And you have some types that bloom early, mid, and late, which you can have a variety of daffodils for quite a while in the spring. Hyacinths, everyone knows they have great color and great fragrance. Tulips. Only plant these if you want to give the deer a lunch buffet, if you have deer. If you don't have deer, go for it. But if you have deer, this will just attract them in. They'll be beautiful in bud, and before they bloom, the deer are going to chomp their head. Mid-spring combination. Now late spring, Allium. I don't know if you guys have seen Allium or heard of them before. I was kind of surprised when I posted some online this spring that people didn't know what they were. One girl told me she thought that looked like the COVID virus, I guess because of these little spiky dots off of it. But these are great. There are many varieties of them. You have some that are as big as a softball head, and they're deer resistant. And when their blooms dry and the flower petals fall off, they can be left outside as interest or used for crafts. You can spray paint them and they look like fireworks. Bachelor Buttons are another great flower. They're very prolific and they will spread. So if you want a big area of them, that's great. If not, just pull them out. This is a dwarf cherry pie tree or shrub, whichever you want to call it. It's been planted in my yard for probably 10 years now. And if you beat the birds to them, you get the cherries, and you can make pies with them, and they're very good. And this is the tree blooming in the springtime. Iris are another good selection. They're carefree, sweet smelling, and have lovely foliage. Now this particular variety of iris I brought with me when we moved from Columbus. And in Columbus, it was a rebloomer. It would bloom in the spring and it would bloom again in about October. Well, I brought it up here thinking it would do the same thing, and it doesn't. We are that different a planting zone from Columbus. We don't have at the time it takes it longer to bloom in the spring and thus go through its cycle, and it times out in the fall. We get frost before it would bloom again. Lilac, there are lots of varieties of lilac out there. This here is a very young old-fashioned bush. Right now, it is as tall as my first story on my house. This is a bud from it, getting ready to open this spring. And this is a Miss Kim. They now, however, have newer Miss Kim varieties that are ever bloomers. Peonies are great. You've all seen them around in the spring. And this is a pink tree peony. It looks just like your normal bush variety peony, but it blooms about a week earlier. And being a tree peony, you will have winter interest in your garden. It reaches 4 to 4.5 feet tall. Poppies, they come in different colors, not just red anymore. How about the Viburnum Korean spice bush? It's a little bit of a different viburnum, and it gives a wonderful scent. Weigelia, you'll get one riotous bloom in the spring, and then it will rebloom throughout the season. And here's a late spring combination. You can see the alliums up there. Now, early summer, Astilbe. I just love the Astilbe. Here we have red, pink, and white. And then you can see them around the side of my house right here. And this is looking down from my deck. They have great color. Oh, and also with the Astilbe, if you let the flowers stay on and they dry, you'll have some interest that way too. Coral bells, they stay colorful all season, and in the mild winters we've been having the past several years, I've had color from them even in the middle of winter. They come in so many different colors, and they do have flowers. They're little wispy flowers, and they're very pretty. Coneflowers. We have all seen the different coneflowers, and once they start to bloom, they will continue all summer long with deadheading. Now, the second blooms won't be as large as the first ones, but you will still get blooms. Or you can leave the first ones on, and then the seed pods here will give you interest. And as you can tell, our pollinator friends like the Echinacea or coneflowers. Catmint, let me tell you, if you plant something in the mint family, like this catmint here, you've got to be careful because it will spread. But this helps this catmint because you can cut it back and yank it out, and after it's done reblooming, just cut it back and it will grow and rebloom, and you will think that it's having its first bloom all over again. The daisy. Who doesn't love the white happy daisy? And hydrangea big leaf. I would say hydrangea has to be my favorite woody. It is so versatile. You can get so many different colors from it. And once they start to bloom, they're colorful all season long, and some will change color. Now, if you look at the name hydrangea, it has hydra in it. Hydrangea needs lots of water, so remember to hydrate your hydrangea. This is a Nico blue. This here is a pink one. It will never be anything but pink. And this is called a blushing bride. But sometimes I get carried away with the aluminum sulfite and I have a blushing groom. This one is a good one to have. It can change colors with the aluminum sulfite. It's called a lace cap hydrangea. And this is the hydrangea named Invincible. It was named for breast cancer. And this one, believe it or not, you can cut it down to about 2 inches above the ground, and it comes back beautifully in the spring. This is lavender. Most people do not think of deadheading their lavender, but if you deadhead it, you will have a second bloom in about 4 or 5 weeks. This little plant here is called a pincushion because if you look at it before it starts blooming, it looks like a little pincushion. And when you deadhead it, it will just bloom its little heart out all summer long. Yarrow. Now, I'm partial to pink. I don't like yellow, so I found a pink yarrow. And once yarrow starts blooming, it does not stop if you deadhead it. It can also spread too, so when you're deadheading, if it's getting too out of control, just, uproot it a little bit. But deadheading will refresh it and it won't be tired looking anymore. Midsummer, the balloon flower. This is a recent picture of my balloon flower. It starts blooming in the beginning of July. And if you deadhead it, I have had them bloom through August for me. The other day I took off about 100 spent blooms. It had been about 2 days since I deadheaded. And you really can't tell. You know, it looks as good after it looks better after you deadhead, but it doesn't look moth-eaten or anything like that. It just does a fantastic job. It's a real workhorse in the garden. The blazing star, they bloom from the top down and their foliage turns bronze in the fall. Butterfly bush, and this is why it's called the butterfly bush. If you don't have a lot of space in your yard, there is a micro mini variety that won't get any taller than between 1 foot and 18 inches. They have some varieties that can get over 10 feet tall if you leave them alone. And they have everything in between. I have one in my front yard that gets to about 5 feet. And then we were traveling in the UK last summer or the year before, and they're considered a weed there. This picture here was taken off of a train, and as you can see, they just grow wild and they think they're weeds. And here again is another butterfly on the butterfly bush. And I deadhead them to bring more new blooms. The California lily of the Nile, this is one that I like to push the envelope with. I keep mine in a nice sunny spot right by a wall, and I cover it in the fall. Baby Joe is a miniature Joe Pie bush, and it attracts butterflies, and you'll notice the tropical milkweed next to the Joe Pie bush. I plant it there so after the butterflies come, they will lay their eggs on the milkweed. Hardy crepe myrtle, yes, it really is hardy in our zone. Even during those Arctic blasts we get, I found out the hard way that it was hardy because I thought mine was dead, and I said, okay, I'm gonna replace this plant. I would waited and didn't see it coming back. So I got 2 nice woodies to put in there where they were, and I was digging the hole, and sure enough, there were sprouts coming up. I just hadn't looked hard enough. And if you look around Willowick, you will see several crepe myrtles. Hostas, they come in a variety of colors and bloom times, and some can even withstand a great deal of sun. However, deer do enjoy hosta. Now this is my absolute favorite hydrangea. I put it in a different spot because it's a different type of hydrangea and starts blooming a little later than the big leaf variety that you saw. This is Hydrangea Vanilla-Strawberry. It starts blooming towards the end of July, and they start out white. And then they go to pink, and you can see this one hasn't totally all turned pink yet. And then towards the fall, they turn a burgundy. And you can have all 3 colors going on the plant at once. And I think they're gorgeous. And this one you can have in sun. It can take quite a bit of sun. It's the conical shape, looks like an ice cream cone. And but remember, it is a hydrangea, so it has hydra there, and it needs a lot of water. I plant common milkweed. This type milkweed is a perennial. It comes back year after year. You do have to keep it under control unless you have a great big area for it, because it will spread. Here's a monarch on that one too. And she looks like she could be laying her eggs. I do get the caterpillars, and I've gotten some butterflies from there. But these blooms are gorgeous. They kind of smell like vanilla, and they're big, and they do attract the butterflies, and we need a lot of things to help our monarchs. But you do have to be careful with the milkweed. Phlox, I like the big boy phlox. They give a great show of color. and deadheading will bring more blooms. And you can actually get these to bloom at different times in your yard if you let some just come up and grow naturally, and then you can trim some of them at one point, and then 2 weeks later trim some more on a different one, and you will have 3 different bloom times for them. A deer taught me that. And Rogerza, this is a great plant in the shade. It's a tall shade lover. It does die back down to the ground in the fall. It's a true perennial. It's a relative of the Astilbe, and it likes moist but well-drained soil. Sea holly is one you don't see too much. It's a steely blue in color, almost a metallic blue, the flower turns out. It reminds me of a firework on the 4th of July. And here's a midsummer collection. In the late summer, asters are good. Bees love aster, and they're a good late season pollen source. Hardy hibiscus, this tall one is the hardy hibiscus, and the shorter one is the bush variety. Deadheading helps prolong the blooming. Mine are in bud right now. They should be starting to bloom in early August. Hosta and coral bells, they're still giving us color right now. Monk shoots, I would not plant these. They're poisonous, but they are a late bloomer and they do have different colors. Mums, contrary to popular belief, mums are perennials. That's not what the garden store wants you to think. They want to sell them to you as annuals, but they are perennials, and if you plant them deep enough, they will come back in your yard. Sedum, they come in many different varieties that bloom at many different times. The Autumn Joy sedum is one that blooms in the fall, and this one I got from a friend. And if you trim it back in the spring or let the deer do it, they won't flop over for you. And this is a late summer combination, and your eyes aren't playing tricks on you. This is the same planting area, the same walled area that you saw before with Astilbe and in the shade. When this picture here was taken, there was no house next door to me. Now that there's a house next door to me, I had to turn it into a shade garden. Now for the fall, the toad lily, it's a very small and delicate flower that blooms in the fall. They're a turtle head, and this is the one that has the blue-green foliage. This turtle head is Hot Lips. It's a shade lover that likes moist but well-drained soil, and it blooms from the bottom up. It is a slow spreader, but it will spread. I know ornamental cabbage is not a perennial, but it looks so lovely peeking out of the snow too, and it won't be destroyed by the frost like so many of our plants are. How about planting a sugar maple that well, it doesn't bloom in the fall, but it gives us gorgeous color in the fall. And here's some fall combinations. This is in October in Willowick on the lake, and this is in November in Columbus. How about planting some Oriental or Asian lilies? There are many varieties, and they can start blooming from late spring to midsummer. And here are some of my old Easter lilies that I've planted, peeking in among my roses. How about daylilies? This is what got me started on gardening, were the daylilies. As you can see, there are many different colors and varieties. You have some that can bloom from early to very late. There are reblooming daylilies now. And if you plant them with your spring bulbs, their foliage will grow up and cover the dying spring bulb foliage, which I think is great. I even have a very late bloomer that is called Last Man Standing, but it really isn't the last man because the rebloomers are still reblooming. How about some flowering trees? You have your weeping cherries, or crab apples. This is a picture of a crabapple tree I planted about 5 years ago. It was very little. It fit in the back of my daughter's car at the time it was planted here. And it is a cardinal crabapple. I love the color. It's a great complement to my neighbor's weeping cherry. You can also do the crepe myrtle that I mentioned, or a red bud, or a tulip tree. How about grasses? Have you ever thought of those as perennials? They're perennial grasses. They are many lovely ornamental grasses for sun or shade. This is fountain grass Carly Rose. There's hardy pampas grass, blue lime grass, blue fescue, and perennial fountain grass. Pansies. I know they're an annual, but they are a volunteer type of plant. I put some out very early in the spring of 2009 when we first moved to our current house, and I still see surprise pansies every year. They reseed themselves. Roses. Everybody loves a wonderful rose. Try knockout roses or sub-zero roses. Those are both hardy to our zone. And again, with roses, I like to go a zone or two below what we are because we do get those Arctic blasts. But please watch out for your rosette disease. That is, most people haven't heard of it. It's your rose leaves will all kind of turn red and the rose will look like it's been witch's broomed. Like you've cut off the top and shoots have doubled and tripled. And if you get that in your yard, you need to dig the rose up and destroy it. How about some shrubs? Did you know they now have reblooming azalea shrubs? I have several blueberry bushes in my yard. I have the top hat variety, which will stay smaller, and they turn bright red in the fall. Butterfly bushes are a blooming shrub, or dogwood or holly, and they now have, like I said before, reblooming lilacs. This is a red twig dogwood, and the new growth is red and it will stay red all winter. Okay, here are some helpful websites. Our website, of course, is lake.osu.edu. And if you go and look online for perennials for specific sites and uses, or perennials for spring or summer or fall, bulbs or more butterfly gardens, and the ASPCA website is aspca.org, and that's the one for the poison control. How about adding some fruits and veggies and herbs to your perennial garden? Some of the strawberry is a perennial. I've had this out back for quite a while. Basil is not, but you know, you can just tuck them in there. I have tomato plants tucked in my perennial garden and no one knows. And here is my blueberry bush. Thank you for attending. I hope you found the presentation educational and enjoyable. I enjoyed talking to you. Does anyone have any questions?
There was one question. It says,
I can't hear you, Peggy.
oh, that's right. How's this? Is this better?
Yeah, that is.
Okay, my hydrangea doesn't bloom every year. Why is that?
Well, it's most likely that you got the old type of hydrangea. The new varieties now bloom on new wood. The old varieties all bloom on old wood. And if there is a frost or you cut them back, then you are not going to get any blooms that year. So the only way to tell the difference between the new bloomers, the new hydrangeas and the old hydrangeas, is with the tag that comes in the plant, because you can't tell by looking at them. The other way is cut them down, and if you don't get any blooms, you'll know you have the old variety.
Okay, great.
Anything else anybody wants to know? If not, thanks for having me, and I'm going to turn the screen back over to you, Peggy.
All right. Thanks so much, Shelley. That was really a nice presentation. Gives us a lot of options while we're planning for our gardens. So I thank you very much. And make sure you look at our website and on Facebook for the programs coming up. The one next week is going to be on financial portfolio. And then the one in August is on the Lake County crime files. So we have some Perry crimes in there too. So it should be very interesting. So make sure you tune back with us. And our library is open now again. We're open Monday through Friday until 6 o'clock and Saturday on our regular hours until 4. So thanks for joining us, and stop